primary school curriculum and instruction. Course learning outcomes. Upon successful completion of the course, you will be able to understand the term curriculum under various contextual views. Identify the expected roles of the teacher in relation to the views of curriculum. Recognize the differences between curriculum development and curriculum planning. Identify the steps involved in curriculum development and curriculum planning process. Participate in curriculum development and planning process. Make appropriate curriculum decision as practitioners. Appreciate the different historical periods in the history of Ethiopian formal school curriculum. Explore the nature of primary school curricula in the different periods of Ethiopian education. Recognize the different instructional methods applicable at primary school level. Apply the appropriate instructional methods in presenting the subjects under the concrete school reality. Plan lessons using varieties of active learning methods in ways that motivate students for learning. Organize and manage their classrooms effectively. Unit 1, Curriculum Development. Introduction. Dear learner, welcome to the first unit of this module. This unit deals with different views of curriculum, curriculum development and planning process, curriculum organization, curriculum implementation, curriculum evaluation, teachers' roles on curricular-related issues, and trends in curriculum development in Ethiopia. Thus, you will get essential knowledge and skills which are mandatory for effective primary school teacher. To this end, you need to be committed throughout the unit so that you would be able to effectively implement the designed curriculum in your area of specialization. Learning outcomes. At the end of this unit, you will be able to define the term curriculum using different curriculum views. Explain the reasons for the variations in the conceptions held on the term curriculum. Identify the major foundations in curriculum. Write the expected roles of the teacher under the different perspectives. Assess the historical development of Ethiopian curriculum. Actively participate in designing appropriate curriculum for primary school students. Discuss the major criteria used for evaluating primary school curriculum. Demonstrate a sample syllabus for primary school subjects. Definition of curriculum. Introduction. Dear learner, you will be exposed to different definitions of the word curriculum. The definitions are classified as broad and specific. Hence, analyze the varied definitions in the light of primary school curriculum and their implications to the teaching-learning process. Activity. Dear learner, you might have heard the word curriculum before. You have learned various subjects when you were a student at primary school and secondary school. Therefore, before you read the definitions suggested by scholars, define the term curriculum by using your own words and make a comparison. Like many of the academic subjects, the word curriculum comes from a Latin word currere meaning race course. Indeed, until quite recently, even the most knowledgeable professional educators regarded curriculum as the relatively standardized content covered by students in their race towards the finishing line to get certificate, diploma or degree. It should not be a surprise, then, to find that many current concepts of the curriculum are firmly grounded in the notion that curriculum is a race course of subject matters to be mastered. Although curriculum specialists have attempted to clarify and limit the meaning of curriculum, disagreement still exists with respect to what constitutes legitimate definition of the word. As a result, the curriculum of schools and of colleges has been defined in several ways. Why do you think the reasons for not having one agreed upon definition? Generally, The various definitions of the term curriculum can be categorized into two as follows. Broad definitions. The broad definitions are opening to many interpretations. In other words, one broad definition of the word curriculum contains different specific concepts. Ralph Tyler, 1949, all of the learning of students which planned by and directed by the school to attain its educational goals. D.K Wheeler, 1967, by curriculum we mean the planned experiences offered to the learner under the guidance of the school. J. Lewis, 1981, define curriculum as a plan for providing sets of learning opportunities for persons to be educated. Learning opportunity implies a planned and controlled relationship between pupils, teacher, materials, equipment and the environment in which it is hoped that desired learning will take place. M. Shilbeck, 1984, the learning experiences of students, insofar as they are expressed or anticipated in goals and objectives, plans and designs for learning and the implementation of these plans and designs in school environments. Glatthorn, 1987, the curriculum is the plan made for guiding learning in schools, usually represented in retrievable documents of several levels of generally and the actualization of those plans in the classroom as experienced by the learners and as recorded by an observer. Those experiences take place in a learning environment which also influences what is learned. Specific definitions. The specific definitions imply activities, which are measurable and observable. Examples: a curriculum is an outline of a course of study, Murray Print, 1987. A curriculum is a set of subjects, Colin J. Mauch, 2001. A curriculum is a school timetable. Activity 1. Discuss on the various definitions of curriculum and justify why they can be considered as broad and specific. 2. What similarities are there among the broad definitions of the word curriculum? Curriculum development. Introduction. Dear learner, you have learnt about the diversified definitions of the word curriculum in the first section. This section deals with the major foundations of curriculum, models of curriculum development, curriculum organization and selection of contents and learning experiences using different criteria. Foundations of curriculum. Where do curriculum developers obtain their basic understanding of education and curriculum? There exists a common pool of information from which people draw their requirements. This database then becomes the foundation upon which curriculum conceptualization is built. Thus, curriculum foundations may be defined as those basic forces that influence and shape the minds of curriculum developers and hence the content and structure of the subsequent curriculum. The literature in the area of curriculum generally distinguishes three categories of sources of curriculum foundations. The three sources of curriculum foundations constitute together the principal areas of influence on curriculum developers in their consideration of curriculum. These influences affect developers' ways of thinking about curricula and, in the process, produce conception of curricula. At some later time developers express these conceptions both explicitly and implicitly when devising curricula. Let us now examine these curriculum foundations in a little more depth to provide some sense of perspective to the influence of each foundation upon the process of curriculum development. Philosophical foundations. Philosophy and philosophical assumptions are basic to all curriculum foundations as they are concerned with making sense of what we encounter in our lives. How curriculum developers perceive the world, and hence education, may be determined by posing the following three philosophical questions. These are: What is real? What is good? And what is true? The answers philosophers provide to these questions vary. As a result, different philosophical views emerge. In turn, differing philosophies will affect how individuals perceive and relate to the curriculum. The following are educational applications of philosophy. Essentialism probably is more widely accepted among Americans than any of these other orientations. Essentialists believe that there is some specific, basic information that all learners should know. They believe that people need this practical knowledge to function as productive members of society. Essentialists place heavy emphasis on science and technical fields. They prize, as well, business and other subjects that have a clear connection to the world of work, and often are suspicious of offerings in the arts and humanities. They do not object to this content per se but find it less important. When budgets are tight, essentialists argue for reducing course offerings in these areas in favor of keeping more practical courses. Essentialists hold that people are not naturally good, and thus support strong adult leadership for younger learners. The ideas of hard work in the classroom and a disciplined classroom environment are integral to this perspective. Perennialism assumes that a limited number of common themes have challenged humans through the ages. Perennialists believe that there are never any truly new problems. What we see as new are really variations on themes that have dominated human affairs for centuries. Since these historic problems have been studied for years, solutions offered by thinkers of the past continue to have validity even today. For perennialists, the task of schools is to bring learners into contact with the great thinking of the past. This exposure will provide them with a set of insights that will serve them well as they grapple with the challenges of the modern era. Perennialists favor having all learners encounter a common school program with contents drawn heavily from literature, humanities, and the classics. Classes must be rigorous, and teachers must work hard to assure that no learner leaves school without a solid grasp of those basic insights seen as a key to survival in a human community. Perennialists are suspicious of vocational programs and of the whole idea of relevance, which may divert learners from the task of mastering basic human truths. Perennialists argue that learners who leave school with these insights well in hand will have little difficulty in adapting to the demands of the world of work. Progressivism has little in common with the perspective of the perennialists. Unlike the perennialist who argues that the basic nature of problems stays the same over time, the progressive sees problems varying dramatically in character over time. Hence, for progressives, yesterday's answers have little to offer people confronted with today's problems. Progressives argue that learning experiences should be organized to provide many opportunities for people to develop individual problem-solving skills. They regard learners and human beings in general as basically good, and thus assume that they will behave responsibly even when given a good deal of freedom of choice. They believe that learners should be allowed to make some personal learning choices as they go through a school program, and that learning to deal with that freedom is part of the process of growing to maturity in a democratic society. Content from the social sciences is particularly prized by progressives, as it is thought to afford many opportunities for developing problem-solving skills. Furthermore, these disciplines expose learners to a wide range of dilemmas of types they may be expected to encounter throughout their lives. Reconstructionism holds that modern technology and modern economies are out of control, and that human society is threatened because no limits have been placed on the evolution of dangerous technologies. Though modern economies have generated wealth at rates undreamed of in the past, poverty remains a particularly intractable problem. The only hope, suggest Reconstructionists, is to rebuild societies along more humanistic lines. This philosophy implies a need to raise learners' levels of social conscience. Programs drawing insights from such disciplines as sociology, with its emphasis on group and social behavior, are thus important to Reconstructionists. Reconstructionists view learner activism positively, and would encourage learners to engage in political and other change process assertively, with a view to bettering the human condition. Ideally, programs in schools would lead human society to reorganize itself. These descriptions are very brief. They do, however, highlight distinctions among the cited positions. Curriculum developers need to be aware of these differences. They need to recognize, also, that, no matter how hard they work, programs they develop and install will not be supported by everyone. People with different philosophies apply different standards of excellence when they evaluate instructional programs. Activity 1. Discuss in group how philosophical sources can contribute to the development of curriculum. 2. Discover concrete examples that indicate philosophical foundation in the textbooks from primary school subjects. Sociological Foundations. It is hardly surprising that society and culture exert enormous influences on the formation of the school curriculum. After all, it is the society that devises schooling to ensure the survival of the cultural heritage. Thus, it is not uncommon to see an extensive influence of society and culture upon curriculum in schools. Curriculum developers serve the function of translating traditional assumptions, ideas, values, knowledge and attitudes into curriculum objectives, content, learning activities and evaluation of these curriculum elements. This shows that curriculum developers both transmit and reflect the culture of which they are part. Thus, it is not possible to talk about a culture-free curriculum. Rather, one should consider a curriculum as a situation where judgments are made as to what aspects of culture are to be included and why. Consequently, when developers devise curricula, the cultural background of those developers will become evident in the content they select, the methods they include, the objectives they set and so forth. Society and culture influence curriculum developers simply because they are members of a particular society. When the process of curriculum development takes place, the cultural traits within developers influence the very selection of objectives, contents, methods and evaluations that constitute the curriculum they are devising. Alternatively, curriculum developers may be well aware of societal and cultural influences and have the deliberate intention in mind of reproducing aspects of that culture in the curriculum. The issue then becomes whether the curriculum should mirror society or it should become a tool for change. Above all, curriculum developers, whether at national, local or school level within educational enterprise, should not forget that they are a product of their culture and that every decision they make will be culturally related. Psychological Foundations. The contribution of psychological sources to the foundation of curriculum is significant and growing. Curriculum, therefore, can draw upon psychology, particularly educational objectives, student characteristics, learning processes, teaching methods and evaluation procedures. In general, the role of psychology in the field of curriculum relies on understanding the nature of the learner and that of the process of learning. The curriculum worker's opportunities to master the psychological field are limited, but he, or she definitely needs to have general understandings bases on psychological theory and research. Mental discipline and curriculum. Mental discipline is a theory of learning, which was also known as faculty psychology. According to this theory, the mind was made up of series of faculties, each of which was related to a particular function or ability of the mind. This discipline was the prevailing theory during the long period when rote memory was the primary learning process. Curriculum content was often chosen on the basis of how well it would discipline and exercise the mind, rather than because of its value in the life of the student. The curriculum designed to meet its needs of the philosophy, which supported the mental disciple theory of learning, was often composed of subjects such as foreign languages and mathematics. Connectionism and curriculum. Connectionism is a theory of learning based on the connection of the various elements of the nervous system in causing behavior. The curriculum dictated by connectionism has a great deal of drill and repetition in it. Behaviorism and curriculum. Behaviorism developed along strictly scientific lines that was dealt with and explained in terms of observable reactions. The curriculum implied by behaviorism differs little from that of connectionism. Drill remained a prominent method of teaching, but experiences selected in this theory are to produce conditioned responses. Gestalt theory and curriculum. The greatest contribution of the Gestalt theorists was in the area of perception. Gestalt theory leads to the development of a curriculum that offers the learner an opportunity to discover processes and relationships. Emphasis is placed upon perceiving a whole in order to understand the importance of a specific. Generalities and principles are emphasized in preference to isolated facts and meaningless drill. Activity 1. Discuss how society and culture influence curriculum development. 2. As foundations of curriculum, list the major differences among philosophical, sociological and psychological sources. 3. Find out evidences that represent psychological foundation and sociological foundations from primary school subjects. In the case of sociological foundation, please check that the textbooks contain diversified cultures from the nations and nationalities of Ethiopia. Models of curriculum development. The objective model. The objective model is also known as rational, classical models. Its roots is the behavioral psychology. This approach to the curriculum process emphasized the fixed sequence of curriculum elements, beginning with objectives and following a sequential pattern from objectives to content, method and finally evaluation. In this pattern, objectives serve as a basis for devising subsequent elements, with evaluation indicating the degree of achievement of those objectives. The two principal proponents of rational objectives models are Ralph Tyler and Hilda Taba. Tyler's model. Tyler argued that to develop any curriculum, one had to pose the following four fundamental questions. These four questions represented the major tasks and issues to be dealt with in the process of curriculum development. These questions are: 1. What educational purpose that schools seek to attain? Objectives. 2. What educational experiences can be provided that are likely to attain these objectives? Instructional strategies and content. 3. How can these educational experiences be organized effectively? Organizing curriculum experiences. 4. How can we determine whether these purposes are being attained? Assessment and evaluation. Tyler, sometimes referred to as the father of the curriculum movement, Tyler sought to instill in developers of curricula a more logical, systematic and meaningful approach to their task. His work is now understood by many curriculum writers because of the rigid nature of this objective model. However, over time much of his work has been misinterpreted, treated superficially and even ignored. Tyler describes and analyses sources of objectives that come from learners, studies of contemporary life, academic subjects, philosophy and the psychology of learning. Certainly, Tyler has had significant effect upon curriculum developers and writers for the past decades. In general, Tyler has viewed curriculum planning as a four-step process. These are: Step 1, formulation of objectives, Step 2, selection of contents and learning experiences, Step 3, organization of contents and learning experiences, Step 4, evaluation. According to Tyler, the identification and defining of objectives is crucially important in developing an educational program for learning. To him, objective is given greater emphasis and should be made the first area of concern for curriculum development, and that is why the Tyler model is referred to as objective model. He defines objectives as an intended reset of learning outcomes. In the formulation of objectives, Tyler suggests three important sources of information. These are: study of the learners. According to Tyler, before the formulation of educational objectives, the needs, interests and background of the learners should be carefully investigated. Based on the investigation, what the learners lack or do not have are made to be part of the educational objectives. Study of the contemporary life. Tyler recommends that major activities of the world of work, significant problems, demands and trends of the society need to be systematically studied and incorporated in the objectives of the school curriculum. Suggestions from subject matter specialists. Since subject specialists are experts or professionals, their suggestions could be utilized in the formulation of objectives. Tyler suggests that the list of statements of objectives on the basis of the above three sources need further screening. In this regard, he forwards two screening devices, and these are the philosophical screening and psychological screening. Philosophical screening helps to select the objectives in terms of what is good and valuable to learn, whereas psychological screening helps to select objectives that are appropriate in terms of the nature and process of learning and in relation to the needs and maturity levels of the learners. Many authors agree that Tyler's model is simplified and linear. However, this model served as the starting point for other models. Taba's model, in her book entitled Curriculum Development, Theory and Practice, 1962, Taba outlined her approach to the process of curriculum development. In this work, she modified Tyler's basic model to become more representative of curriculum development in schools. While it is linear in approach, Taba argued for more information input at each stage of the curriculum process. In particular, she suggested a dual consideration of content, logical organization of the curriculum, and the individual learner, psychological organization of the curriculum. To emphasize her point, Taba claimed that all curricula are composed of fundamental elements. A curriculum usually contains some selection and organization of content. It either implies or manifests certain patterns of learning and teaching. Finally, it includes a program of evaluation of the outcomes. Therefore, Hilda Taba proposed a 7-steps approach to the process of curriculum design and development in 1962. The model proposed by her gives priority to the diagnosis of needs. The orders, steps, as Taba perceives it are: Step 1, diagnosis of needs, Step 2, formulation of objectives, Step 3, selection of content, Step 4, organization of content, Step 5, Selection of learning experiences, Step 6. Organization of learning experiences, Step 7. Evaluation, determination of what to evaluate and ways and means of doing it. The procedure of curriculum development proposed by Taba is basically the same as the Tyler's model, except some difference like the following. Taba included diagnosis of needs. She treated contents and learning experiences separately in terms of both the selection and organization. Taba also capitalizes the interdependence and interrelatedness of the various elements involved in the development of curriculum. Taba stressed the relationship among the factors of the model in contents and learning experiences. In general, she included in her model the fundamental elements of curriculum such as objectives, contents, learning experiences, organization and evaluation. Tyler's influence is also clearly seen in a diagram model offered by D.K Wheeler. This model had 5 basic stages as follows. Basically, Wheeler used the fundamental elements of the curriculum processes as suggested by Tyler. But, Wheeler considered Tyler's approach is linear and argues that curriculum development is a continuous process. Thus, the activities involved in the planning need to be interested in a continuous and cyclical form. According to Wheeler, the process of curriculum development begins with the treatment of objectives at various levels. The treatment begins with the aims from which intermediate goals are derived. Wheeler goes to state that further specific behavioral outcomes are defined to be attained at a shorter period, including at a specific instructional level. The process model, it was developed by Lawerance Stenhouse. He argues that a process model is more appropriate than an objective model in areas of the curriculum which center on knowledge and understanding. The root of this model is in philosophy of education. Lawerance believes that it is possible to design curricula rationally by specifying content and principles of procedures rather than by pre-specifying the anticipated outcomes in terms of objectives. The justification for choosing such content rests on the pupil behavior to which it gives rise, but on the degree to which it reflects the field of knowledge. In this design the process is specified, that is the content studies, the methods employed and the criteria inherent in the activity. The end product produced by pupils is not specified beforehand in terms of behavior but can be evaluated after the event by the criteria built into the art form. In this model behavioral objectives are absent. In the place of objectives, the emphasis is on defining acceptance of procedure for dealing with such issues. It is concerned with teaching content. It does not presuppose a linear treatment of its component. This model is sensitive to differences in subject matter and it assumes the autonomy of the individual teacher. However, the process model is still concerned with ends, though admittedly not behavioral in character. That is, its emphasis on content and principles of procedure trends to obscure this necessary feature of curriculum planning. There are a number of practical objections to it, the most important being the difficulties associated with assessing pupils' work and the problem of teacher competence. This is because the model assumes that teachers will be refining and deepening their understanding and judgment of the concepts, principles and criteria inherent in their subjects. Stenhouse admits that a process model is far more demanding on teachers and thus far more difficult to implement in practice, but it offers a higher degree of personal and professional development. The situational model. This model has its roots in cultural analysis as developed by Shilbeck. The model puts curriculum design and development firmly within a cultural framework, and it views such design as a way in which teachers modify and transform pupils' experience through providing insights into cultural values, interpretative frameworks and symbolic systems. This model is based on the assumption that the focus for curriculum development must be the individual teachers. In this model, school-based curriculum development is the most effective way of promoting genuine change at a school level. Curriculum experts will go to individual school and work with the teachers to develop the curriculum to improve the teaching of a subject. According to Shilbeck, the model has 5 major components. These components are: situational analysis. This involves a review of the situation and an analysis of the interacting elements constituting it. External factors include broad social changes including ideological shifts, parental and community expectations, the changing nature of subject disciplines, and the potential contribution of teacher support systems such as colleges and universities. The internal factors include pupils and their attributes, teachers and their knowledge, skills, interests, etc., school ethos and political structure, materials, resources, and felt problems. Goal formulation. The second step is formulation of the statement of goals embracing teacher and pupil activities, though not necessarily expressed in behavioral terms. Such goals are derived from the situational analysis only in the sense that they represent decisions to modify that situation in certain respects. Program building. This comprises the selection of subject matter for learning, the sequencing of teaching, learning episodes, the development of staff and the choice of appropriate supplementary materials and media. Interpretation and implementation. In this step, practical problems involved in the introduction of a modified curriculum are anticipated and then hopefully overcome as the installation proceeds. Monitoring, assessment, feedback and reconstruction, which involves a much wider concept of evaluation than determining to what extent a curriculum meets its objectives. Shilbeck's situational analysis model is not an alternative to the other two. It is a more comprehensive framework which can encompass either the process model or the objectives model, depending on which aspects of the curriculum are being designed. This model is flexible, adaptable and open to interpretation in the light of changing circumstances. The model outline does not presuppose a means-end analysis at all. It simply encourages teams or groups of curriculum developers to take into account different elements and aspects of the curriculum development process, to see the process as an organic whole, and to work in a moderately systematic way. The curriculum models in general are prescriptive in that they recommend how the activities of curriculum design ought to be conducted. Activity 1. List the major difference among the objective model, the process and situational models. 2. Discuss in group how these models can be used in the practical aspect of curriculum development. 3. Identify the strengths and weakness of the objective, process and situational models. Selection of curriculum experiences. Since contents are the vehicles or means through which objectives are attended, they have to be given due consideration at the time of selection. If irrelevant or inappropriate contents and learning experiences are selected, then the student's time will be wasted and the intended learning outcomes will not be attained. That is, the selection of contents and learning experiences is as important as that of the formulation of objectives. Activity 1. Before you study the following topic, try to define the term content by using your own words. Check whether the definitions you gave the content are the same as with the definitions given. 2. What is the difference between subject knowledge approach and process approach? Discuss. Components of curriculum experiences. The components of curriculum experiences are contents and learning experiences. Contents, content is equated directly with knowledge. Many educators believe that content consists only of the facts, concepts and generalization, or the knowledge related to a particular subject or theme. Content is defined as the subject matter of the teaching-learning process, and it includes the knowledge, facts, concepts, generalizations, principles and so forth, processes or skills associated with that knowledge base and the values associated with subjects or whatever is being learned. Content selection. One of the first tasks facing a curriculum developer, armed with a set of objectives and recommendations from a situational analysis, is to select appropriate contents to meet those objectives. Content or subject matter is only part of the total culture. It includes what men know and believe and their ideas and loyalties, but not everything they have created. When curriculum developers undertake the actual selection of contents, the stand they take on what contents to include may be seen in terms of a continuum. It is suggested that the approach towards selecting content varies between those who emphasize a knowledge-based approach where the learning of factual materials is of paramount importance, and those who emphasize the process approach where skills are highly valued and seen as integral to effective understanding. Learning experiences are the interactions of the learners with their environment in their effort to acquire the contents. They are mental operations and exercises of the learners that would enable them to develop the desired learning outcomes. That is, the changes of behaviors expected at the end of the various levels of instruction. Learning experiences include the different techniques, strategies and methods that are used for the purpose of teaching and learning. They are the activities the learners exercise and develop in order to meet the expected changes of behaviors by way acquiring the contents. Activity 1. Define the phrases content and learning experience. 2. What is the difference between learning experience and content? Explain using concrete examples from primary school subjects. Selection criteria for contents and learning experiences. Dear learners, so far on your last section you learned criteria for formulating objectives and uses of stating educational purpose in behavioral terms. Now let you focus on the meaning of contents and learning experiences, criteria and general principles of selecting contents and learning experiences, respectively. Objectives. At the end of this section, you will be able to define content, define learning experience, list possible kinds of contents, list possible criteria used in selecting relevant contents, give examples as to how planners use each criterion to select contents, list general principles employed in selecting learning experiences, and give examples as to how planners use each principle in selecting learning experiences. Definition of contents. What is content? Discuss. Give specific examples related to your specific area on normative and descriptive content. Now please check your points of discussion if they include what are considered the main points, by reading the next section. Content refers to the facts, principles, concepts, ideas, etc. to be learned. It includes what people know and believe and their ideas and loyalties, but not everything they have created. Tools and machines are not contents, but knowledge about tools and machines, about how they are made, their operations, and their uses, is content. It consists of facts and principles. Facts are reported in statements about things that can be perceived directly or in principle. Such contents are said to be descriptive contents. On the other hand, we have contents characterized as normative. Such contents consist of the rules of the game, norms, or standards by which individuals make moral and aesthetic choices. It represents the value standards men have built up through generations. Definition of learning experience: discuss and identify what is meant by learning experiences, give specific examples related to your specific area on learning experiences. Have you defined learning experiences and provided related examples? I hope you can do so by referring your cumulative teaching experience. And please see how far your experience relates to what is reviewed in the text. The learning experiences are the mental operations that students employ in learning content. In the actual learning acts, the two are in constant interaction. One cannot deal with content without having a learning experience. The discussion of the behavioral objectives shows also that some educational objectives are served by the content, whereas others are best implemented by certain learning experiences. The objectives described as acquisition of knowledge, the concepts, ideas, and facts to be learned, can be implemented by the selection of content. On the other hand, selection and organization of content alone cannot result in the attainment of objectives such as the development of thinking, skills, and attitudes. To attain these, students need to undergo certain experiences, which give them an opportunity to practice the desired behavior. Learning experiences are the key factors that shape the learner's orientations to the content and, ultimately, their understanding of it. As many educators have noted it, perhaps the first important consideration in achieving a wider range of objectives is the fact that it is the learning experiences and not the content as such, that are the means for achieving all objectives besides those of knowledge and understanding. Learning experience involves the instructional component of the curriculum. Instruction refers primarily to the human interaction between teacher and student in ways that are designed to achieve the goals of the school. Hence, one can firmly say that no curriculum, regardless of its design, can ignore content and learning experience. What educators need to remember is that, in reality, content and learning experiences do not exist apart. If students are thinking, they are usually thinking about something, some content. If they are engaged in some experience, such as reading a book, they are combining both a learning experience and content. Content and learning experiences always comprise curriculum unity. Students cannot just engage in learning, or in studying, without experiencing some activity and some content. Likewise, students cannot deal with content without being engaged in some experience or some activity. However, as it is already mentioned above, the term learning experience is not the same as the content with which a course deals nor the activities performed by the teacher. The term learning experience refers to the interaction between the learner and the external conditions in the environment to which he can react. Learning takes place through the active behavior of the student. It is what he or she does that he or she learns, not what the teacher does. It is possible for two students to be in the same class and for them to be having two different experiences. Suppose that the teacher is making an explanation and that one student is much interested in the problem and is following the explanation mentally, seeing the connections that are made and taking from his own experience certain illustrations as the teacher goes along with the explanation. On the other hand, it is possible for the second student to be engrossed in thoughts of a forthcoming basketball game and to be devoting his attention entirely to planning for this game. It is obvious that although the students are in the same class, they are not having the same experience. The essential means of education are the experiences provided, not the things to which the student is exposed. This definition of learning experience is involving the interaction of the student and his, or her environment implies that the student is an active participant, that some features of his, or her environment attract his, or her attention and it is to these that he, or she reacts. Tyler, 1949. Self-test exercise. Let us say that you are requested to compute the sum of two vectors A and B in your physics class following what you have learned. Please, describe clearly the content and the learning experiences in which you are expected to be involved in the computation. You are now studying this learning material. Which part of the material is the content and which part of your involvement in the study is the learning experience? Criteria for selecting contents, based upon your teaching experience, suggest relevant criteria to be considered in selecting contents. State your own views. Have you stated? That is great. As we see in the definition section, contents are means/vehicles or instruments to achieve educational ends. To realize this basic purpose is required, content should be selected following relevant criteria. This section, therefore, focuses on the discussion of some basic criteria used for content selection. Validity and significance of content. In one sense, curriculum content is valid and significant to the extent that it reflects the contemporary scientific knowledge. The concept of validity refers to the extent to which contents and learning experiences serve the particular uses for which they are intended. As it is remarked above, the basic question of validity is focused on how fundamental the selected knowledge and experiences are. That is, how the contents and learning experiences reflect the basic ideas, concepts and thought systems. Consistency with social realities. If the curriculum is to be a useful prescription for learning, its content and the outcomes it pursues need to be in tune with the social and cultural realities of the times. Applied to the selection of content, this criterion further selects from the scientifically valid and fundamental knowledge that which is also significant. Some knowledge has the additional value of providing the most useful orientation toward the world around us. For instance, while the study of algae and of the atom could be equally fundamental, the latter is presumably of greater significance, at least as general education for understanding the world around us. If education is to serve an unpredictable future, it is especially important to cultivate the type of mental processes, which strengthen the capacity to transfer knowledge to new situations, the creative approaches to problem solving, and the methods of discovery and inventiveness. Furthermore, since complexity, anonymous control, and large-scale organizations seem to be increasingly the order of the day, with the consequent dangers of conformity and other orientation, autonomous thinking and independent judgment need to be cultivated with special care if even the minimum of latitude in the freedom of individual choice essential to democracy is to be maintained. Balance of breadth and depth. Activity. Do you think that the subject matter, which you are taking now, meets the criterion of balance of breadth and depth? Justify your response. Have you made a justification to the activity? this may need a greater level of thought. Let us now examine the root concepts and how far curriculum planners implement this criterion. Curriculum should represent an appropriate balance of breadth and depth. Yet depth of understanding and a breadth of coverage are two contradictory principles. One cannot practice both to an extreme. They are especially contradictory when subject matter or content is viewed as an accumulation or collection of specific descriptive facts rather than a disciplined way of seeing the important relationships between facts and central ideas. According to a second view, depth means understanding fully and clearly certain basic principles, ideas, or concepts, as well as their application. To achieve depth of understanding, one needs to explore ideas fully enough and in sufficient detail to comprehend their full meaning, to relate them to other ideas, and to apply them to new problems and situations. To begin with, one could study the concept of light in sufficient depth without necessarily covering all the phenomena of light. Secondly, if one has understood the functioning of the wave theory of light, it may not be necessary to do the same regarding sound. The depth understanding of one principle might make it unnecessary to cover certain other areas of physics. The important consideration should be the balance between depth and breadth. Provision for wide range of objectives. Curriculum should provide for the achievement of a wide range of objectives. Mastery of content is only one of the many possible outcomes of learning. Various other types of behaviors are both possible and necessary educational objectives. An effective curriculum provides acquisition of significant new knowledge and for the development of increasingly more effective ways of thinking, desirable attitudes and interests, and appropriate habits and skills. The principle of active learning has been widely accepted. Educational theories have long stressed the importance of active learning. For example, most of John Dewey's writing centered on advocating the idea of learning as an active transaction between the learner and his environment, including the content of the curriculum. Unfortunately, this principle of active learning was in practice often reduced to manipulative activity, which is mostly done by following directions. However, activity learning has to provide the conditions for reflective thought, and further, that reflective thought itself is active learning. The emphasis on multiple objectives and active learning requires a reconsideration of the way to spend time. If a learning activity is to carry many objectives and provide practice for thinking and inquiry, it may require more time than would be warranted by its content alone, because the students need to learn new behaviors. Why do you think that the selection of learning experiences is also as important as that of contents in catering to a wide range of objectives? Have you made your assertion? Good. Now let you see whether your points of discussion relates to what is described in brief in the text. If you come up with a different argument, please indicate how the difference. Learnability and adaptability to experiences of students. It seems almost trite to say that curriculum content should be learnable and adaptable to the students' experiences. The practical application of this criterion, however, is far from clear. One factor in learnability is the adjustment of the curriculum content and of the focus of learning experiences to the abilities of the learners. For effective learning, the abilities of students must be taken into account at every point of the selection and organization, but especially in planning concrete experiences designed to develop the power to discover general ideas and concepts. Suppose you are faced with concepts and ideas, which are too strange for your students to treat in the classroom. Then, what will you do as a teacher? Have you made your suggestion? That is great attempt. Now I kindly ask you to check whether your suggestions go in line with what is considered in the text. The problem of making the curriculum learnable involves also the task of translating the social heritage into experiences, which help each student to make it his own. In some ways the students need to experience whatever they are learning. This means that an approach must be used to learning the essentials of the curriculum, which connects that which the students have already experienced with that which is yet to be learned. The more heterogeneous or deviate the background or the social learning of the students, the more important it is that there be a variety of bridges between what is now understood, the current concepts and meanings, and that which is to come. Appropriateness to the needs and interests of the students. A purely educational definition of need is the gap between the present state of an individual and the desirable objectives, such as a need for sensitive awareness of other people and their values, for critical thinking, for competence in social skills, for adequate achievement in arithmetic, for democratic social attitudes, and for skills in group life. Curriculum organization. Following the selection of contents and learning experiences, there is a need to put them into a meaningful and systematic pattern or order. This is referred to as organization. Organization requires the arrangement of contents and learning experiences into some kind of continuity and sequence. This helps for a better and deeper understanding that is instrumental for the successful realization of educational objectives. It usually believed that a curriculum should be organized properly in order to meet its objectives satisfactorily. Whatever desirable objectives are formulated, and relevant contents are selected if the material is presented in a haphazard way, that is, if the organization of this material is overlooked, then the expected objectives may not be achieved adequately. To accomplish this goal, to have a better organization of a material, the designer should have not only a thorough understanding of the curriculum content and his, or her objectives but also, principles for organizing the needs and problems of the content. Principles are basic generalizations that are accepted as true and that can be used as basis for reasoning or conduct. Definition of curriculum organization. Some educators take curriculum organization and curriculum design as synonymous. For instance, in the Dictionary of Education, both are defined as the way in which the component parts of the curriculum have been arranged in order to facilitate learning and teaching and to enable schools to formulate feasible daily and weekly schedules. This definition emphasizes on the means of putting together the objectives, content, methods, learning experience, and evaluation techniques systematically according to their suitability in leading a better teaching-learning process. Similarly, curriculum organization is defined by other educators as the arrangement of the components or elements of a curriculum into a substantive entity. It refers to the way in which curricula are treated. Here, the components or elements of a curriculum are similar with the above explanation. These include aims, goals, objectives, subject matter or content, learning activities and evaluation. The nature of these components and the manner in which they are organized in the curriculum plan comprise what we mean curriculum design or organization. Hence, curriculum organization deals with the pattern or the arrangement of these elements. That is, it focuses on how these elements can be brought together to form a systematic unity. Moreover, curriculum organization is an activity which is usually done at the time of either planning a new curriculum or revising the existing curriculum. Although most curriculum plans within their design the above essential elements, Often they are not given equal weight. Frequently, content or subject matter receives the primary emphasis. But, sometimes schools do create designs that stress primarily on objectives and evaluation approaches. Some designs give primary emphasis to learning experiences and activities. The curriculum designer's curriculum approach and philosophical orientation influences which design does he or she actually select. Activity 1. Define curriculum organization. 2. Mention the elements that should be organized. 3. List the current patterns of curriculum organization. Organization of contents and learning experiences. To make contents learnable and to bring about the slow but profound change in behavior, there is a need to organize contents and learning experiences in such a way that they reinforce one another. The reinforcement of contents and learning experiences at different levels is assumed to bring a cumulative effect. Furthermore, as noted by Taba, what makes learning in schools is different from learning in life, since learning in school is organized. According to this notion, if contents and learning experiences are not organized, learning becomes something done disorderly and incidentally. The selection of contents and learning experiences could be adequate enough, but the outcome could be a failure due to lack of proper organization. As noted by Taba, curriculum organization poses many questions and requires an application of all we know about the nature of knowledge, about child growth and development, and about theory of learning because of its complexity and difficulties. In order to achieve maximum results from the selected contents and learning experiences, advocates of the objective model advise curriculum workers and teachers to examine the relationship of the experiences over time and also from one area to another. These two kinds of relationships are referred to the vertical and horizontal relations respectively. Vertical relation is characterized by the criterion of level and the horizontal by the criterion of relation across subjects. In considering these two kinds of relationships, Tyler's assumption is that attainment of objectives usually takes a long time and single learning experiences which doesn't recur at different levels and across subjects may have very little effect on the learner. Organizing contents and learning experiences enables to maintain relationship between subjects both in case of vertical and enables to maintain relationship between subjects both in case of vertical and horizontal directions. It enables also to employ theories of learning in organizing the contents and learning experiences, that is, deciding what should come first and what comes next, considering the capacity, interest, motivation, readiness, need, etc. of the learners, and also enables to maintain order and coherence. The process of organizing contents and learning experiences demand to base organization on certain criteria and principles. Activity 1. What is the importance of organizing contents and learning experiences in curriculum development? Discuss in detail. 2. Discuss with your classmates as what will happen if contents and learning experiences may not be organized. 3. List the organizing principles and make a detailed discussion by using your own examples. Organizing principles. Tyler identified some organizing principles upon which the continuity, sequence and integration of learning experiences and attained among them the major elements identified to serve as threads for the learning experiences. These organizing principles are: discuss and identify principles used to select contents and learning experiences. Although the particular content and learning experience are appropriate for attaining objectives will vary with the kind of objectives aimed at. There are certain general principles that apply to the selection of content and learning experiences, whatever the objectives may be. These are: for a given objective to be attained, a student must have experiences that gives him/her an opportunity to practice the kind of behavior implied by the objective. That is to say, if one of the objectives is to develop skill in problem solving, this cannot be attained unless the learning experiences give the student ample opportunity to solve problems. Since the complete definition of the objective includes not only a statement of the kind of behavior involved, but also a statement of the kind of content with which the behavior deals, it is also true that the learning experiences must give the student opportunity to deal with the kind of content implied by the objective. Learning experiences must be such that the student obtains satisfactions from carrying on the kind of behavior implied by the objectives. Self-test exercise. If your objective was stated as at the end of this lesson, students are expected to identify the taste of lemon. And you order the student to taste the lemon and tell his feeling, he or she may dislike the taste of lemon from then on. If this is so, how do you judge the satisfaction, which the student will obtain by carrying out the kind of behavior implied by the objective? For example, in the case of learning experiences to develop skill in solving health problems, it is important that the experience not only give the student an opportunity to solve health problems, but also that effective solutions to these problems shall be satisfying to him/her. If the experiences are unsatisfying or distasteful, the desired learning is unlikely to take place. Self-test exercise. When a student is invited to read some short stories, novels and similar literature, he may not frequently practice it at the beginning. However, when he finds this literature closely related to his life experiences, he will be attracted towards literature and develop the interest of reading. Now, what is the relation of this incident with the principle discussed above? Matching the reactions desired in the experience to be within the range of possibility for the students involved, that is to say, the experiences should be appropriate to the student's present attainments, his or her predispositions, and the like. This is another way of stating the old adage that the teacher must begin where the student is. If the learning experience involves the kind of behavior which the student is not yet able to make, then it fails in its purpose. This too requires the teacher to have sufficient information about his or her students to know whether their present attainments, their present background, and their present mental sets are such that the desired behavior is possible for them. There are many particular experiences that can be used to attain the same educational objectives. There are probably an uncertain number of experiences that could be thought of and worked out to attain particular objectives. This means that the teacher has a wide range of creative possibility in planning particular work. This also means that it is possible that a given school may develop a wide range of educational experiences all aiming at the same objectives but capitalizing on the various interests of both students and faculty members. Searching for particular learning experiences that bring about several outcomes. A fifth principle is that the same learning experiences will usually bring about several outcomes. For example, while the student is solving problems about health, he is also acquiring certain information in the health field. He is also likely to be developing certain attitudes toward the importance of public health procedures. He may be developing an interest or a dislike for work in the field of health. Every experience is likely to bring about more than one learning objective. On the positive side, this is a decided advantage because it permits economy of time. A well-planned set of learning experiences will be made up of experiences that at the same time are useful in attaining several objectives. Negatively, it means that the teacher must always be on the lookout for undesirable outcomes that may develop from a learning experience planned for some other purpose. Criteria for organization. Organizing contents and learning experiences as Tyler showed help to relate various experiences, which together comprise the curriculum to produce the important effect in attaining the objectives of the program. In this line, curriculum specialists identify four major criteria to be met in building effectively organized group of contents and learning experience. These are: continuity is the planned repetition of content at successive levels, each time at an increased level of complexity. Continuity also refers to the vertical reiteration of major curriculum elements. Tyler has mentioned that recurrent and continuing opportunity must be given for this skill to be learned, to be practiced and developed. Of course, the recurrence of concepts, ideas and learning experiences becoming deeper and broader as the level increases. Therefore, the purpose of continuity is to provide for a cumulative learning to take place. It is to provide for a greater depth and breadth of understanding to all varieties of learning, thinking, skills and attitudes. However, this cumulative progression need not necessarily be tied up with a shift in content. It is conceivable that the same content can be studied on two levels, one requiring a more mature understanding, more penetrating analysis, and a deeper insight than the other. For instance, the child may learn notions of interdependence at grade 1 level by studying the way in which the activities and the need of the family are dependent on the activities of other people. A third grade may examine the concept in relation to interdependence among the community services. A 12th grade student may encounter the same concept, but with reference to the interdependence of nations. Sequence is putting the content and materials into some sort of order of succession. Sequencing in curriculum can be in terms of the content or learning experience. Content sequencing is done on the basis of the subject matter logic, while the learning experiences are sequenced using psychological approaches. Logical sequencing. The logical sequencing approach of content organization puts the content of the materials into some order of successions in answering the questions, what is to follow. What logical sequencing is a matter of specifying the learning structure of any subject. In this process of acquisition of knowledge, every new capability builds on established foundation previously learned knowledge. In this way, a student is only ready to learn something when he has mastered the prerequisite knowledge required to be a base for the new content. In logical sequencing, the important organizing principle used in putting the content is chronological order. Chronological principle is arranging facts and ideas in relation to time sequence. This sequencing usually is particularly to and in history, and courses in literature also can be arranged based on this principle, and selection of literature's example, the battlefields in Ethiopian history, can be arranged in chronological order. Psychological sequencing. The learning experiences are arranged based on principle of psychological sequencing by giving more attention to the learning activities in relation to the learner's abilities, interests, aspirations and backgrounds rather than the course and content coverage. The designers should select learning experiences based on the developmental levels of the learners, taking into account their individual differences in many aspects like interest, intelligence, level of aspiration and background. Accordingly, the activities and assignments given and the learner's performance and expectations also differ. In this sequencing approach, learning experiences can be arranged following certain organizing principles like establishing scope, refers to breadth or latitude of the curriculum, and it shows what must be provided to students in different grade levels in a school. That is, it reflects the type of educational experiences that are believed by planners to be relevant or appropriate for learners at particular stages of development so that the educational objectives can be realized. Scope shows that curriculum horizontally by identifying common curriculum experiences that could involve all students from all cultures in a given country's educational system to be provided in a given semester or year. It facilitates the teacher's work by showing the content of a semester's or year's work that is appropriate for the students to learn. Scope could be achieved if and when it fulfills the following criteria. If it provides for all the demands of a complete society, common needs and problems of children at all grade levels, and when it bases on basic principles, values, and issues and particular society considers worthy, when it should also give room to continuity of learning experiences, and when it focuses upon life situations and help children to solve problems in the society. Activity 1. Explain the difference between continuity and integration. 2. Discuss the difference between sequence and scope. 3. Elaborate logical and psychological sequencing and show clearly the difference between the two. 4. Evaluate the application of the organizing criteria in the primary school textbooks based on your major areas. Summary. The term curriculum is defined in several ways since there is no generally agreed definition of it. The three generally distinguished categories of sources for curriculum foundations are philosophical sources, sociological sources and psychological sources. How curriculum developers perceive the world and education may be determined by the philosophical questions such as what is real, what is good, and what is true. The societal and cultural influences can affect curriculum developers. There is a significant contribution of psychological sources to the foundation of curriculum. There is a strong teacher-curriculum relationship. Teachers can play a great role on the curriculum, being implementers, adopters, developers, researchers and evaluators. Whereas curriculum serves as the major source of valuable information for the teacher concerning the overall purposes, objectives of instruction, contents, patterns of organization, methods, techniques and strategies of instruction, etc. Some of the curriculum development models are the objectives model, process model and situational model. To develop a curriculum, need diagnosis from the society using different techniques such as questionnaires, interview, public hearings, analysis of social indicators and observation. Contents and learning experiences are the two major components of curriculum experiences. Self-test exercise, Instruction 1, write true if the statement is correct and false if the statement is incorrect. 1. Philosophical screening attempts to analyze learners' characteristics. 2. It is logical to argue that aims are the immediate sources for educational philosophy. 3. Continuity expresses the organization of different curriculum contents within a single course. 4. The ideology a country follows doesn't have any influence on the type of country offered in schools. 5. A curriculum foundation that highly focuses on the nature of the learner is known as sociological foundation. 6. Curriculum organization can be viewed as the process of putting the planned curriculum into action in the classroom context. Instruction 2, fill in the following blank spaces with the most appropriate words or phrases. 1. The type of curriculum evaluation which is implemented throughout the instructional process is called. 2. The selection criteria that expresses timeliness of curriculum contents is. 3. The cyclical approach of curriculum development in the objectives model was coined by. 4. The interaction of the learner with a learning environment is called.